said, my name's Sue St. Amand from West Warwick School Committee, but my full-time job is with behavioral health care, developmental disabilities in hospitals in Cranston. I work in the capacity of administrative support for the Substance Abuse Prevention Unit, which are a host of professionals that do an amazing, amazing job. And there are several key people who are strong advocates for preventing the legalization of marijuana in Rhode Island, primarily because of the effects that it could have on the youth. What I want to do is put out my phone number to all of you, because I could be a resource if your community is looking to connect with one of these professionals to get on board to help stop the legalization of marijuana and join that advocacy to stop it. My number is 401-462-1999. That comes right to my desk. I recently took on a position also with the same office, same phone number, as an FDA youth coordinator, and will be conducting the underage tobacco buys. So it's extending my youth coordination back out into the community, but I'll be possibly running into any one of you at some time because we cover the entire state, but I am in the infancy stage of that new position. Also, as a behavioral health care administrative support person, I was instrumental in working with all of the communities on the Rhode Island Student Survey. Now, as a member of the school committee in West Warwick, I cannot stress enough how important it is that you as school committee members approve that administration. There is some pushback from parents. I'm sure superintendents can attest to that. But it is the information that's been provided both by Joey and Dr. Larkin. The students, we hope, will answer these survey questions correctly and honestly, and it's amazing the information that you can garner from that. So it is important as school committee people, please support when your superintendent asks that the administration be allowed in your district. Please support that effort. That's all I have. Thank you.
First of all, disclosure, I am not well versed in what marijuana will do to our children. I don't have a medical background. However, I have served for 10 years on my town's substance abuse task force and have come to, at that time, 10 years ago, our biggest problem was alcohol. And we got the kids involved. And they came up with some really creative ideas on how to help stop alcohol. And I really felt encouraged the last couple of years because we saw the decrease. Well, unknown to me, apparently there's something that takes its place, and it's marijuana. But they can be a really great resource. They came up with ideas like, they sent the survey home to the parents. And rather than make sure that the children didn't fill out the survey and brought it back, the parents had to sign it, both parents had to sign the survey. And all the surveys that came back with 2 signatures on it, they were put into a big box and a name was pulled. And the prize was free tickets to the senior prom, or the junior prom, whichever age you were. And then other gifts were a florist who donated the flowers, a place where you could rent your tuxedo. So they really got into that, and we were amazed at the number of surveys that came back with the parents' signatures on it. So they spread that around the school. They put up posters. They have permanent posters in our cafeteria encouraging students not to drink and drive, not to do anything. We have a SAD chapter in our high school also that's very active. One of the things that they do is they sponsor a trip to the ACI, and there they get to meet with people who are incarcerated because of drunken driving accidents. And they come back slightly changed from when they got on the bus to go down there. So we have found that we felt that we were doing a good job of getting this message out. Another thing that I found myself to be unbelievable touching to the students was we held just before the proms. We didn't tell the students. We only had the juniors and seniors involved. We didn't tell them. In the middle of the school day, all juniors and seniors were requested to report to the parking lot. There they found a car wreck, actual automobiles that had been in automobile accidents. A local person who does towing managed to get two really banged up automobiles and put them in a position that looked like an automobile crash. We had the police come with their sirens on. We had the rescue truck come, the fire department came, and there were students. One was laying on the ground, which the firemen immediately declared dead and covered with a sheet. There was another young man hanging out of the car door, and they were attending to him. We were outside now. There wasn't a peep. You could hear a pin drop because they saw it for real. And I kind of got a kick, if you can get a laugh out of something. The young man who was pronounced dead on the scene, after it was all over, of course, got up and was walking around. And a number of young ladies went up to him and said, "Are you all right? Are you okay?" So that's when we kind of knew they really got the message that we were trying to tell them. We're very lucky. We have a great deal of police and fire help in our community. They're always willing to come out and help us if we want to do something like that, to impress upon our young people. But if you just don't mind me reading something that I found quite interesting, based on your discussion, and you mentioned Colorado quite a bit. I had the opportunity at a recent Rotary meeting. We had a guest speaker, Mr. Michael Carullo, from What's the Rush RI? His organization is an advocate for evidence-based marijuana policies and for Rhode Island to take its time before legalizing recreational marijuana. During his presentation, he mentioned Denver, Colorado, and Stoner Hill. The story of Stoner Hill piqued my interest and led me to do some research. Stoner Hill is actually Commons Park. The park is located in the heart of Denver, 150 yards from the City Hall, 300 yards from the State House, 200 yards from a large library, and an art museum 150 yards, and within striking distance of Coors Field, the home of the Colorado Rockies. Since the legalization of marijuana, Stoner Hill has become the daily meeting place for an ever-growing number of homeless youth. The location has become a place for ever-growing number, sorry, I read that. The location has become a perpetual party, a micro-economy, and a meeting place for Denver's youngest homeless and assorted travelers with their model of live and let live. Stoner Hill is the symbol of the growing crisis in the state of Colorado, Washington, Oregon, and Alaska of the problem of large increase in homeless youth since the legalization of recreational marijuana. For example, the first state to legalize marijuana, Colorado has seen a 27% increase in 2 years, and Washington a 13.3% increase in homeless youth in their city. This is an example of an issue that can arise with the legalization of marijuana that is not often thought of. After Mr. Carullo's presentation, my imagination took hold. Would Rhode Island develop its own Stoner Hill? We have some perfect locations, for example, Kennedy Plaza. In Providence, we no longer need to worry about eliminating the smoking of cigarettes, but the smoking of marijuana. Or maybe the lawn of the State House would become Stoner Hill. Would Rhode Island see a 27% increase in homeless youth as well? Most of them migrated with little more than the clothes on their back and very little money. Would they also sleep under the railroad bridges as they do in Denver? Denver's weather is very unpredictable, as is Rhode Island. I have been to Denver, where it was in the 70s one day and snowing the next. The influx of homeless youth has caused Denver to see a 150% increase in the need for homeless services. In Rhode Island, homeless shelters are maxed out, especially in the winter months. Some in Rhode Island see the legalization of marijuana as a means to increase state revenue, but as Colorado is experienced, it is costing more to take care of the many problems that present themselves and was not considered up front, like the increase in fatal auto accidents of marijuana use in Colorado from 6.9% to 21%. I could continue to quote statistics, but there's just one more story I would like to tell you. There are other tragedies that are not always associated with marijuana. In my hometown, a terrible incident occurred 2 months ago. A call to the fire department led them to a home that was occupied by a husband, wife, and 3 children. When the firemen arrived, they found the mother and 3 children overcome with carbon monoxide. They were all rushed to the hospital, but tragically, the mother did not survive. The cause of the carbon monoxide buildup in that home was that the furnace in the home had been altered to provide heat to the garage to ensure the marijuana plants were kept warm. This was a legal operation as the father has a license to grow medical marijuana for his youth. Under what heading do we place the mother's death? Does it get a death under marijuana? Accidental poisoning? Just a question. In closing, a quote from former drug czar William Bennett: "While supporters applaud America's new cash cow, marijuana, perhaps we should ask ourselves whether this newfound flow of money should be hoarded at the expense of American youth." That's the end of my statement. Thank you.
Any questions, Brett?
As with smoking, I think it was Everett Koop, the former Surgeon General, that I believe was attributed with the effort to conduct the anti-smoking effort. I don't see anything with regard to anti-marijuana smoking, or use anywhere in the country, and I'm just not aware that there's any effort to provide a lot of the information that's been presented by this panel, and I wonder how that would be accomplished. I understand that Dr. Koop had a lot of trouble rallying the effort for the anti-smoking campaign, and also with alcohol, we have numerous ads and so on. But I don't think there's anything really with regard to marijuana. And then to suggest that it has medicinal properties just compounds the problem, because if I'm a young person, I just imagine, well, gee, it's being used for medical purposes. What's wrong with it? So there's no, other than to attend a presentation like this and hear all these negative numbers, and especially when states seem to be so interested in approving its use for revenue purposes, and yet you find the revenue is nominal and the costs are huge. The medical costs and psychiatric costs and so forth. It's just hard to believe that any state should approve it. But now we may be surrounded by states that have approved it. So if we don't, then what happens with regard to enforcement? How do we federal enforcement versus the state enforcement? The states versus the municipals? I don't have the answer to this. And I had one other question that Doctor, I think you didn't wish to mention. Is there any compelling evidence that marijuana is a gateway drug for the opioids? Because I saw another presentation where Dr. Gladstone,
You don't want that one?
I think it's
I have my own theory. Let's not
Newport,
medically.
suggested that it was. He's a psychiatrist in Colorado, and his opinion was it was a gateway drug, and he used his own caseload to suggest that it was.
So one thing I am not, I am considered by my colleagues the most my immediate colleagues, I mean, not sort of, widespread. My colleagues come to me to ask about medical marijuana right now, which is a bit alarming to me, actually, if I'm the one that people are asking. So what I am not is an expert in substance use. I can just but the question of a gateway drug, I think, is really difficult to tease out. What is the gateway drug? Is it tobacco? Is it alcohol? Is it marijuana? Most people who use tobacco don't necessarily go on to use marijuana necessarily, or heroin, or cocaine. So that sort of slippery slope argument or gateway argument, I think, it's hard to know what the real answer is. I think the Attorney General may have a somewhat different view of that, but I'm not sure that you can say that it is a gateway drug. It does not necessarily imply or necessarily lead to escalating or different types of use. But it's also unmistakable that oftentimes people who are using worse substances like heroin or prescription opiates or cocaine may have some experience with marijuana as well. It's really very difficult to sort of, I guess the real bottom line is it's very difficult to prove causation. With regard to the question of why is there not more public health or public service campaigns out there, the Attorney General's last slide was about money. That's what it's really about. And I also think it's also the institutions in society which typically would be, hashing this out a bit, are trying to hash out whether or not they should be doing it. So I think if the legislature had a firm conviction that it was a bad thing, they might be doing something more. And also a lot of the legalization has been on the basis of voter referendums, not actually the legislature.
I would just like to add as well, and this is speaking as a member of the school committee, as a parent, not as an official of BHDDH in any way. However, as a member of a substance abuse prevention task force in the town of West Warwick for a number of years, getting the youth, preventing the legalization right now, they're trying to prevent it so that the youth will not have access. That, just as the Tobacco-Free Rhode Island was successful in passing so many ordinances and laws where prohibit the sale of tobacco to anyone under the age of 18. Now they're trying to push that to 21. Getting the youth and letting the youth hear the dangers of even their grandmother's marijuana is not the marijuana they would get nowadays. So there really is it's difficult, and I'm not a doctor either, but it's difficult to compare the addictive, how addictive today's marijuana will be, or will it be a gateway to something stronger, because this drug is stronger. This is stronger than what your grandmother or your great-grandmother had. But I do think that as school committees, we need to get the curriculum, the health curriculums focused on the dangers of all kinds of illegal substances, but in particular tobacco, marijuana, because if in fact it becomes legal, we need those those growing minds to know how dangerous that this can be. And these student surveys are telling the adults and the professionals out there that these students are using it, and it is available, and they know where to get it. So I think the push right now to not legalize it is to protect the youth. But if it ends up passing, because depending on where the lobbyists, where the most money is coming from, our colleague from Cumberland mentioned the Rhode Island Interscholastic League has been at the forefront of so many initiatives regarding substance abuse. And I know when my children were at West Warwick High School, although it was over a decade ago, every student athlete needed to attend a forum at the beginning of every season. And it's something that perhaps every student in the schools need to attend the same forum. It shouldn't necessarily be a requirement of a student athlete. It should be a requirement of, and have a parent, mandate a parent to be there. The mandate is probably perhaps the wrong word, but that's what the student athletes were required to do. A parent had to attend. And there was very strict rules and regulations. And so to address about the youth and legalization, it's getting the knowledge into the youth, and they need I feel they need the adults to help with that, and the more advocacy for them.
Can I just add 2 points real quick? I'm sorry. I think to answer your question, I think that the reason you haven't seen more people come out is because this is such a politically fueled conversation that it's really hard for certain industries, associations to really put their neck out on this issue. That's my experience. There is a national movement by Smart Approaches to Marijuana that is trying to push the issue, and I encourage you to look at their website. Also, the Association of Pediatrics is starting to come out and make some waves. The Association of Adolescent Psychiatrists are starting to come out. But locally, we have a stakeholders group that the Attorney General has formed to have different industries come in just so we can kind of data share, information share. And I would encourage anyone in this room, if you would like to be a part of that or know of the meetings, please contact me and we can certainly make you a part of that. As for the gateway, I think if you're sensitive to substance use as an individual, you're going to be sensitive to marijuana. That's kind of how we see the gateway issue.
As a retired state employee who worked for the Division of Substance Abuse from 1978 until 1988, the Department of Behavioral Health, as a probation supervisor and probation officer from 1988 until 2008, supervising the sex offender unit, Providence Superior Court, parole, and the Prison Rape Elimination Act unit, and Project Safe Streets. I validate everything you're saying. The problem is, from my perspective, I still live this every day because my wife is an administrative assistant similar to you at the Department of Transportation, the Traffic Management Center, and my cousin Gabriel Abadi, who used to be director of MAD, is now the director of the Office of Highway Safety, who Jody you know, I'm sure. You're talking to the wrong crowd because we're hearing what you say. The power brokers you have to speak to are Senator Josh Miller and Representative Slater. They're the ones that you have to convince the people that are making money off the compassion centers. Okay? You have to convince the State House representatives. You don't have to convince the school committees. We all know the dangers of marijuana, and all of us have been touched by it at some point in our lives or others by family members. So I commend you for what you're doing. Really, you're all doing wonderful jobs. However, if you really want our voice heard, we have to go to the State House and we have to testify and we have to tell. And even then, there's so much money. This is Rhode Island, and there's so much money involved in this. You're not going to see it go to treatment. This has been my experience. It never goes to treatment, never goes to law enforcement. It always goes into the general fund. Mm-hmm. And they say it goes to education, but it never does. And all I can say is keep fighting, Keep doing what you have to do, but it is a never-ending battle until we convince people at the State House. So, good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I have two policy pieces. One, Joey, I know that you spoke to the Superintendent's Association, and you had offered to send a template of what a resolution would look like. And I don't know if that happened, but if...
I spoke to Tim about it this week. It's coming shortly.
So if you could perhaps send one also to this, Tim, then it would allow us to get that in front of our school committees quicker, to have an opposing commercialization of marijuana piece. And secondly, to speak to what you had said about the relationship between schools and the Interscholastic League. If this passes or doesn't pass, some school departments in Rhode Island have what's called a chemical health policy. And I know not all school departments have it. It comes from the Access to Excellence work from John Underwood with the Olympic athletes. And what it states is that the leaders of your school representatives, the children in middle school and high school, whether they be interscholastic leaders, captains of the football team, or whether they are the head of the band or another youth organization, that there are rules that they have to conduct themselves with in order to still maintain that privilege. And it's helped in our community. We've had the policy since my first year as superintendent in 2009, because the children are monitoring each other. And we chose the strongest language of in the presence of some sort of a substance, whether it be alcohol or marijuana. And so that is something we can control. Mm-hmm. And so we're happy to share our policies.
Thank you.
This is just a quick statement. I'm Ann Dixon from the Coventry School Committee. I also have 3 grandsons who are in the Jefferson County, Colorado school system. Drugs are very readily available, marijuana especially, including cocaine in their schools. The problem for the kids is that the drug users are not necessarily the kids who are sitting in the back of the classroom with their heads down on their desk with the little hoodies on their head. They are the kids who are the captains of the soccer team. My grandson told me of one situation of a heavy marijuana use who got a 5 on an AP test. And so they have these examples of kids who are doing well in school, but they also know that they are heavy users. And the only way that my son has been able to combat this is to really be very, very strong about not being a drug user, but he keeps them busy day and night. I mean, when they go to bed at night, they're exhausted because they don't have time to do anything else. But many of the kids see role models not as the ones who are doing badly, but some of the kids are doing very well in school. And that's the biggest problem because the data you presented is very dramatic for us as adults, but the kids don't see that data.